In a galley shed on Lerwick's waterfront, a man sands the curved prow of a 30-foot longship he has spent 6 months building and will burn at Up Helly Aa, the fire festival, before the month is out. At Lerwick Fish Market by 6, boxes of silver mackerel tip onto wet concrete while a buyer's pencil moves down a list. In a Dunrossness Croft kitchen, a salted leg of mutton hangs drying in the smoke of a peat fire. This is Shetland, 100 islands, 16 inhabited, 60 degrees north, closer to the Arctic Circle than to London, and is near to Bergen as to Edinburgh. Everyone here speaks English. Yet every hill and every voe carries a name in a tongue no one has spoken aloud in over 200 years, and for a century, the men who fished these waters did not own the boats beneath them. From the southern light at Sumba to the last rock in Britain, the journey runs through the food the islanders dry against winter, the fire they raise in its deepest dark, and the debt that once bound every crew to a single merchant's ledger. Viking still to the bone. The first thing the islands show a stranger is the light at Sumba Head, a white tower set on a cliff of green-black rock at the southern tip of the mainland, where the land gives out at 60 degrees north and the sea takes over in every direction. On the ledges below, gannets stack themselves in their hundreds, wing to wing on the wet stone, and the beam still turns through a dawn that, in these weeks, never fully went dark. This is the threshold, the door through which nearly every arrival reaches the islands. The cliff falls away to a run of low dunes, and beneath those dunes, the past is stacked in layers. At the foot of the sand, low stone walls rise barely to the knee, the half-buried outlines of houses lived in for 4,000 years without a break. Bronze Age dwellings and Pictish wheelhouses, and, raised on top of them all, the long rectangular halls the Norse built when they came. Inside one longhouse, the central hearthstone sits where it always sat, blackened along its edges where a family once cooked, and the flagstone at the threshold is worn into a shallow dip by the feet that crossed it for generations. It is the place Sir Walter Scott would call Jarlshof, the Jarl's house, in his 1822 novel, The Pirate, though no Norseman ever used the word, and the name is an invention dressed as Old Norse. The ground here keeps its 4,000 years in order, oldest at the bottom. And the Norse did not only name their houses, they named the water too. A voe, from the Old Norse vagar, is a long sea inlet that bites deep inland between low hills, and the islands are stitched with them, the still surfaces holding the reflection of the slopes above unbroken for hours. The word outlived the language that made it. It survives in Sullomvo, in Ulnavo, in Bodamvo. In dozens of names a visitor reads aloud each day without knowing the tongue being spoken. The Norse speech once spoken here was worn away across generations by the Scots and English of the Kirk, the Court, and the Merchant's Ledger, until by the close of the 18th century, its last fluent speakers were gone. In 1774, a visiting minister, George Lowe, crossed to the island of Fula and wrote down a long ballad recited by an old man, William Henry, one of the last who could still speak it. Within a generation, no one could. And yet the map remains a fossil of it, every inlet and headland still answering to words no living person learned at home. The oldest answer of all, though, stands offshore. On the small green islet of Musa, off the east coast of the South mainland, a stone tower stands very nearly as it stood 2,000 years ago. The tallest surviving broch in the world, rising some 13 meters in a smooth, dry stone curve with the sea on every side. It was built in the Iron Age, centuries before the first Norse keel touched these shores, and it was already ancient when those settlers arrived to give the land its lasting names. The broch outlasted the people who named the Voe, and it outlasted their language. It has held its shape through 2,000 years of Atlantic wind. The stones endure, and so do the names. Both belonged to people who had to feed themselves on ground that grows no trees. In a low croft at Dunrossness, the day's larder hangs from the rafter, a leg of mutton turning slowly on a length of string above the peat fire, the fat darkening as the smoke climbs around it. This is rearsted mutton, salted hard, and then wind and smoke dried in the warm air below the roof until it will keep through any winter the islands can throw at it. A family with one such leg and a sack of potatoes banked in the cool of the byre could eat from October to April. The dried meat is boiled down into a thin grey soup or torn into pieces and set beside the potatoes, and the salt that preserves it flavors everything it touches. The room is thick with the smell of it, smoke and fat and brine, and the fire beneath it burns no wood. There are no trees to burn, so the islanders burn the ground itself. On the peat banks, above the village of Voe, a man cuts the moor into wet black bricks with a single angled spade, lifting each one clear and laying it on the heather to drain. The peat is cut in spring and left across the long light of summer, turned and stacked and turned again, until by autumn it is light enough to carry and dry enough to hold a flame. A single winter's warmth is months of patient labor, and it is the fuel of every hearth and every rearsted fire on the islands. The land gives thinly, the sea gives more. At the Lerwick fish market, the day's catch is counted in tons before the town is fully awake. Boxes of mackerel and herring tipped onto wet concrete beneath the lights, while buyers move between them, lifting a fish, pressing a thumb to its flank, marking a figure on a pad. Oily fish is the protein the thin ground cannot grow, and Shetland lands a share of the United Kingdom's mackerel and herring out of all proportion to its size. The island's true harvest, pulled silver from a hard and cold Atlantic. Much of it comes from one small island that has never stopped fishing. On Whalsey, a green island off the east coast that its own people call the Bonny Isle, the fishing families run pelagic trawlers worth more than the houses they live in. Steel boats the length of the pier, tied up below crofts of a few rooms. Around 1,000 people live there, and between them, they crew one of the largest fishing fleets in Scotland. The boats, handed down like land, from a father to a son who grew up mending nets on that same stone quay. The pride here is inherited, and so is the work. And where the boats do not reach, the crofts still hold. At Walls, on the sheltered west side, the small fields run down to the water in narrow green strips. A few sheep on the hill, a turned bed of ground for potatoes, a boat drawn up on the shingle below. This is the mixed living that fed the islands for centuries, a little from the land and a little from the sea, neither alone ever enough. Every herring on that pier once paid a debt the fishermen never agreed to. The debt was older than the man who carried it, older than his father, woven into the law of the islands long before either drew breath. Before the lairds came, Shetlanders held their ground udal, from the Old Norse odal, land owned outright by the family that worked it, passed down without rent and without a lord set above to answer to. It was the Norse way, and it outlasted the Norse tongue by centuries. Then the feudal law of Scotland came north, and with it came men who named themselves the superiors of ground their tenants had held free for 500 years. At Scalloway, on the west coast of the mainland, the shell of a tall castle still stands above the harbour, its windows empty, its stair turning up through 4 floors to open sky. Earl Patrick Stewart raised it around the year 1600, and he raised it without paying for the labour, ordering the tenants of the islands to quarry the stone and carry it and set it under threat of fine and eviction. The work was done in fear. The man who ordered it was taken south and hanged in Edinburgh in 1615, condemned for treason against the crown, and the castle he forced from the islands he scarcely lived to use. The lairds who followed found a quieter instrument than forced labour. Along the Lerwick waterfront, the tall merchant warehouses still crowd the shore at Hayes Dock, their doors opening straight onto the water where the boats once tied to unload. And here, the trading houses, Hay and Company among the largest, ran what was called the truck system. Under it, a fisherman was bound to a single merchant for everything he had. The line and the salt and the meal for his children came from that merchant's store on credit, and the fish he caught could be sold to no one else at a price the merchant alone decided. On the counter inside, a leather ledger lies open, one fisherman's name written at the head of the page, and beneath it, a column of figures in faded ink. The goods taken set against the catch brought in, and the sum at the foot of the page is larger than the sum at the top. A man could fish a whole season and a whole life and finish owing more than when he began. The boat beneath him was not his. The croft behind him was not his. The debt was the only thing he held outright. The money built houses no fisherman ever entered. On Walsay, the same green island whose families still crew the great trawlers, the grandest building of all is Simbister House, a laird's mansion of dressed grey stone, said to have cost more than £30,000 to raise in the 1820s, paid for out of the labour of the fishing tenants who owed the Bruce family their living. The system did not break easily. In 1888, the men of Hoswick, having driven a school of pilot whales ashore, took their merchant to court over the share he claimed of the catch. And they won, and the case became one of the cracks through which the truck system slowly drained away. The Crofters Act of 1886 had already begun to give tenants a hold on their own ground, and law by law, the grip of the laird loosened. For the men who had owed all their lives, freedom came late, and it came in the cold, in the deepest dark of the year. The dark the islands had learned long ago to answer with fire.
It begins months before the burning, in a shed on the Lerwick waterfront, where a squad of men works through the autumn and into the new year building a galley, a 30-foot Viking longship of timber and painted shields, a dragon's head rising at the prow. They build it across a whole winter in the certain knowledge that they will set it alight. On the last Tuesday of January, the islands hold Up Helly Aa, the midwinter fire festival that took its present shape in Lerwick in the early 1880s, and at its head stands the geyser Jarl, a man chosen years in advance, who spends the day in the helmet and ringmail of a Norse chief at the front of a squad costumed as his war band. Inside the shed, in the last days before the night, a builder runs his hand along the gunwale and sets the final shield in its place, each one painted by hand across the dark months, and the finished ship stands doomed under the bare bulbs, smelling of fresh paint and cut pine. When the night comes, the streets of Lerwick are emptied of light. Every lamp in the town centre is put out, and close to 1,000 geysers form into ranks along the darkened street, each holding a torch of sacking soaked in paraffin. And at a single signal, the torches are lit together, a river of fire, half a mile long, winding through the old stone lanes toward the harbour, the galley hauled at the head of it, with a geyser Jarl standing aboard the ship he is about to lose. Along the route, the people of the town stand in doorways and at upstairs windows, children lifted to the glass to watch the fire pass, the warmth of it reaching them through the cold. At the burning ground, the ranks close into a wide circle around the galley, 1,000 flames held in the dark, and a bugle sounds, and the torches are thrown one after another into the hull. The dragon ship that took a winter to build is gone in minutes, the painted shields blackening and falling away, the prow leaning and dropping into the blaze, the heat of it pushing the circle back, the light reaching the low cloud and the wet roofs and the ring of faces around the fire. Nothing is kept. The galley is built to be lost, and lost it is, every year on the same dark Tuesday. And in the morning, the shed stands swept and empty, and the keel of the next ship is laid. The islands burn the dark at the deep turn of winter. Half a year on, at the top of the chain, the dark will not come at all.
The journey that began at the Southern Light ends some 60 miles to the north on Unst, the last inhabited island in Britain, where the single road runs out at the shore, and there is nothing beyond but open water, and somewhere across it, the Arctic. Here, around the longest days of June, the islands enter the weeks the Shetlander calls the simmer dim, the long midsummer twilight when the sun dips below the horizon for only a few hours and the daylight stays. The dark does not come. At 1 in the morning, the hills hold a grey-gold light, bright enough to read by, and the birds, undone by it, sing on through what should be the night. Near the southern end of the island stand the broken walls of Munes Castle, the northernmost castle in Britain, raised in 1598 by Lawrence Bruce, a half-brother to the same Stuart line that once pressed Shetland under the lairds. Roofless now, its corner turrets open to the sky, the castle fills slowly with that low gold light, the long evening reaching into rooms that have had no floor for 300 years. In a kitchen at Haroldswick, near the top of the island, the clock on the wall reads close to midnight. The curtains are drawn back, and a woman sits at the table reading a letter, with no lamp lit anywhere in the house. The kettle cools on the stove. Beyond the window, the geese still move on the water, and the light across the table is the same light that lay there at noon, only thinner now, the color of pale straw. North of the houses, at Hermaness, the cliffs fall away to the sea, and the gannets that began this journey on the ledges at Sombra are here too, in their tens of thousands, wheeling white against the rock through a night that is not a night. Beyond them, the stack of Muckle Flugga lifts its own small lighthouse from the waves, and past that there is only the last skerry, Outstack, the final point of Britain, where the islands give out for good and the sea runs unbroken to the pole. For these few weeks, the people of Unst live almost without darkness.
Children are put to bed while the sky is still bright and lie awake in it. The crofters work their hay late into an evening that holds its light for hours, and the fishermen mend nets on the pier at hours that belong to neither day nor night. The light that turned over the gannets at Samborough, 60 miles to the south, now lies across the whole chain at once, holding the green hills, the roofless castle, the still black water, and the woman at her midnight table, all in the same pale glow. And then, slowly, a few minutes each evening, week by week, the dark begins to come back.
In the galley shed on Lerwick's waterfront, the floor is swept bare. The longship that stood there a week ago, gone now to a smear of ash on a cold field. And against the wall, a first length of new timber already leans, waiting for a prow that will be built across the coming year, only to burn at the end of it. At Samborough, the light still turns through a dawn that never fully darkens. On Wolsey, the trawlers come in, low in the water. In a croft at Dunross Ness, the mutton hangs again from the rafter, the peat smoke climbing around it. The new keel is already laid.